The glass walls of the corporate lounge shimmered beneath the chandelier's golden light, the polished floor reflecting sharp silhouettes of executives and interns alike. Conversations hummed low, clipped laughter rose above the clinking of glasses, and the faint rhythm of jazz spilled from a corner speaker. Emma stood at the edge of the circle, her intern badge glinting under the soft light, her heart racing with the reckless courage of youth. It was her moment to be noticed. "I speak 9 languages," she said, her voice clear, youthful, proud. The words carried like a bell through the room. She hadn't meant it as arrogance, only as a truth she thought would impress, a little offering to a room of powerful strangers. Her teachers had always praised her gift, her family had encouraged her, and in every classroom she had entered, the statement had one admiration. Why not here, in this grand hall of ambition and success? But silence followed. Conversations halted mid-breath, glasses hung motionless before lips, and a few brows arched with concealed disbelief. Emma's smile faltered. She shifted on her heels, smoothing her skirt nervously. Across the circle, a tall man with broad shoulders leaned casually against the marble bar. His suit was understated yet elegant, a quiet defiance against the loud wealth on display. His skin gleamed under the chandelier's glow, and his eyes, dark, measured, unreadable, rested on Emma. Marcus Cole. Everyone in the room knew his name. Self-made millionaire, entrepreneur, son of immigrants. Emma waited for acknowledgement, for applause, for the slightest nod of respect. Instead, Marcus's lips curved, not into laughter, not into warmth, but into a smile edged with something else, sharp, deliberate, almost cruel in its subtlety. The kind of smile that carried stories unsaid. It sliced through Emma's pride faster than words ever could. Her cheeks burned. She looked around desperately, searching for support, but the other faces only watched, some curious, some amused, some pitying. The weight of the silence pressed harder. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low but resonant, each word landing with precision. "Languages are beautiful things," he said, pausing as though weighing the taste of the words. "But it's not how many you can speak. It's how many people let you be heard." The lounge seemed to exhale all at once. A few executives coughed, pretending distraction. Emma's heart thudded in her chest, her smile frozen, unsure whether to laugh or defend herself. She felt exposed, a girl caught in a storm she hadn't seen coming. Marcus turned back to his drink without another glance. The conversation resumed around them, but it was thinner now, forced, as though everyone still tasted the tension in the air. Emma stood trembling slightly, wondering what invisible line she had crossed. Her mind raced. Why did he mock me? Why did that smile sting more than any insult? For the first time, Emma questioned the meaning of her own pride. The 9 languages that once felt like shining medals now weighed heavy around her neck, transformed into something she did not yet understand. From across the room, Marcus's reflection in the mirror caught hers for an instant. His expression was unreadable again, but the trace of that smile lingered, like a shadow she could not shake. The rest of the evening blurred for Emma. She smiled when expected, nodded at strangers, and laughed at jokes she barely heard. But inside, her thoughts circled endlessly around Marcus's words, around the quiet mockery behind his smile. When she finally left the glittering lounge and stepped into the cool night air, the city's neon lights seemed harsher, colder. The laughter and chatter still echoed in her ears, but one voice remained louder than all others. Not hers, his, and Emma knew, with a sudden unease, that the story had only just begun. Emma lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling as the city's muffled noise pulsed outside her window. The chandelier-lit room of the lounge was gone, but the image of Marcus's mocking smile refused to fade. It was burned into her memory, sharper than the golden light, louder than the clinking glasses. She had imagined applause, admiration, even envy. Instead, she had been dismissed with a look, a handful of words, and silence that seemed to choke her from the inside. It wasn't fair, she told herself, hugging her pillow tighter. All her life, Being able to switch tongues had been her greatest source of pride. Teachers had marveled. Friends had teased her playfully, calling her the walking dictionary. Her parents had paraded her talent at family dinners, encouraging her to show off with casual phrases in French, Mandarin, Arabic. Always applause, always warmth, never this. Yet in Marcus's presence, her 9 languages suddenly felt like 9 empty shells. The humiliation dug at her ribs, twisting into something darker. Anger, yes, but also a kind of restless curiosity. Who was he to look at me that way? Emma reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She typed Marcus Cole Entrepreneur into the search bar. Headlines flooded. Son of immigrants builds multimillion-dollar tech empire. From janitor's son to boardroom king. Marcus Cole, breaking barriers in corporate America. Her chest tightened. She scrolled past glossy photos of him shaking hands with officials, standing at podiums, smiling with politicians. He looked untouchable. Yet the smile she had seen wasn't the same as the one in the photos. The one in the lounge had carried weight, pain. Somewhere beneath the glossy success, there was a wound. She didn't know why, but she wanted to understand it. Marcus, miles away, sat alone in his penthouse office. The skyline glowed behind him, a vast ocean of steel and light. He swirled the amber in his glass, the whiskey catching reflections of the city, and thought back to the girl's voice. Clear, naive, proud. 9 languages, she had said. His lips curled again, but this time it wasn't a smile, just a tired twitch. He wasn't mocking her. He was mocking the memory that surfaced the moment she spoke. He heard his father's voice, thick with an accent, stumbling over English words at a government office, only to be met with rolled eyes and laughter. He saw his mother, fluent in 3 languages, humiliated by a cashier who spoke slowly, loudly, as if speaking to a child. And he remembered himself. 12 years old, standing in front of a classroom, answering a teacher in perfect English, only to have the boys in the back mimic his father's accent, laughing until his cheeks burned. It didn't matter how well he spoke. It didn't matter how many languages his family carried in their blood. To the world, their tongues were strange, foreign, lesser. Language had always been a battlefield. So when the girl, Emma, he recalled, boasted of 9 languages with a smile untouched by pain, he couldn't help the reaction. That sharp smile of his was armor, forged from years of mockery, a shield against memories that still whispered late at night. Marcus set his glass down and leaned back in his chair. He wasn't angry at her. She was young, unaware, a child of privilege who had never been told her words didn't belong. But her boast had collided with the history carved into him, and the clash had burned. He thought of her face, the way her smile had faltered, the way she had shrunk beneath the weight of silence. Part of him regretted it. Another part didn't. The truth was cruel. She would forget it in a week, perhaps a day. But for him, words had always cut deeper. Emma closed her laptop at last, the headlines still swirling in her mind. She rolled onto her side, staring at the shadows stretching across her wall. For the first time, she wondered if her gift, the very thing she thought made her special, was meaningless in a world where some people weren't allowed to be heard at all. The thought unsettled her more than the silence in the lounge. Somewhere, beneath her embarrassment, a question began to take root. Not just why did he mock me, but what has he lived that I cannot see? And she knew, though she hated to admit it, that she wanted to know more. The night deepened, her restless thoughts carrying her into uneasy dreams. When morning came, the question remained, lingering like a bruise that refused to fade. Emma's world had cracked ever so slightly, and through that crack, Marcus's shadow loomed larger than she could have imagined. By afternoon, the company atrium glittered, glass walls and white lights, while Emma carried the thin ache of a sleepless night. The crack in her certainty had widened since the lounge. It hummed beneath the showcase's noise. She drifted near demo screens, listening. Whispering threaded the air. His dad cleaned offices at night, a man said. Brought him along. Slept under desks. Explains the grit, another replied. Still slips into an accent when he's tired. Headlines she'd read breathed around her. She pretended to study metrics. Marcus Cole is a story, a junior manager purred. From nothing to boardroom. Great brand asset. Sure, someone snorted. But he's intense. He should smile more. Chip on the shoulder. Angry. The word clanged. A hush rippled as Marcus stepped onto a low stage with other leaders. Marcus, the moderator began, slicing over his greeting. As someone who came from nothing, what does success feel like? Marcus inhaled, answered about distribution and access. Halfway through, the moderator cut in. Right, but the feelings. An executive repeated his last line, louder, winning nods. Another panelist smiled. You're so articulate. The chuckle that followed landed like a cuff. Emma's stomach tightened. Questions bent toward his biography instead of strategy. His ideas sounded credible only after changing voices. Tiny cuts accumulated, bright and bloodless. During Q&A, a hand shot up. Where are you really from? The moderator winced theatrically, then moved on, leaving a sting. At a checkpoint, security waved a VP through, then asked Marcus for another ID. He handed it over without comment. Emma thought of her own tongue, praised for travel tricks, of teachers who clapped when she tested phrases, of never once being asked to prove she belonged to the language in her mouth. For him, belonging seemed revocable. Honestly, a designer whispered, he's lucky the company uses his story. It gives him coverage. Coverage as if weather. Back on stage, Marcus proposed a pilot for neighborhood vendors. The VP interrupted, pivoting to margins. Minutes later, the idea resurfaced as the VP's daring initiative. Applause swelled. Heads angled to him as novelty. The immigrant's son, the exception expected to be grateful. Smiles sharpened when he spoke about cost barriers, as though practicality were rude. The microaggressions were not dramatic. Together they felt tidal. When the showcase ended, people ringed the stage, thrusting cards and half compliments. You inspire my daughter, a woman said. She thinks if you can, anyone can. Could you film a quick clip for our diversity page? Someone asked, already recording. Emma lingered at the edge, watching admiration perform itself while credit evaporated. The humiliation she'd felt last night curdled into something steadier. The knowledge that her praise had cost her nothing. Marcus stepped down. Applause drained into chatter, then into the mechanical hum of cleanup. Camera rigs rolled past, cables snaking over the floor like reminders of staging. A cluster of interns compared notes, trading buzzwords and selfies. The scent of burnt espresso and cologne mingled with the air from the vents. Emma stayed still, as if motion might break something fragile and new. Emma shifted aside as he approached. He glanced at her briefly, a look dulled by fatigue, then passed her toward the exit. Mr. Cole, the moderator called. Sound bite? Something uplifting. Marcus considered, then declined with polite finality. She lowered her voice. I heard things. He weighed the words, nodded once. People hear a lot. I'm sorry for last night. He studied her badge and clenched hands. Something in his shoulders loosened, not forgiveness, just a shift. Dinner, he said, almost to himself, then clearer. Sunday. My family cooks. No speeches. Her breath snagged. Are you sure? Bring an appetite. He moved on, intercepted by a handshake. Emma watched him dissolve into glass and faces, the atrium noise swelling to full brightness. Between the whispers and the invitation, the crack widened again, opening onto a road she hadn't known existed. She stepped toward it. Emma spent the weekend in restless anticipation. The words Marcus had spoken. Dinner. My family cooks. No speeches. Replayed in her mind like a riddle she couldn't solve. She had expected distance from him, maybe even cold dismissal after the lounge and the whispers at the showcase. Instead, he had extended something she hadn't imagined, a doorway into his life. By Sunday evening, she stood outside a modest brick townhouse on the edge of the city. The neighborhood was alive with chatter and music drifting from open windows, children chasing each other down sidewalks, the smell of spiced food floating into the street. It was nothing like the quiet, gated suburb where she lived with her parents. Emma hesitated on the steps, her polished shoes suddenly feeling out of place. The door opened before she knocked. A woman in her 40s, elegant despite her simple apron, greeted her with a wide smile. "You must be Emma," she said warmly. "I'm Grace, Marcus's mother. Come in, come in." The inside was vibrant, walls lined with family photographs, shelves crowded with books in multiple languages, the faint sound of gospel humming from an old radio. A large pot bubbled on the stove, releasing steam fragrant with herbs Emma couldn't name. Marcus appeared from the hallway, sleeves rolled up, his usual guardedness softened. "You made it," he said. His eyes flickered briefly with surprise, as though he hadn't been sure she would. "I wouldn't miss it," Emma replied, her voice tight with nerves. Soon she was seated at a crowded table, plates passed from hand to hand. Roast chicken seasoned with peppers, rice, collard greens glistening with butter. The room pulsed with warmth, laughter bursting from Marcus's younger brother as he teased, his father offering quiet blessings before each dish was set down. Emma ate slowly, trying to take everything in, the rhythm of this home, the easy banter, the way everyone leaned close when someone spoke. It was noisy, messy, alive. At one point, Marcus's sister, Lila, fixed her with a kind but searching look. "So, Emma," she said, "Marcus tells us you speak 9 languages?" Emma flushed, gripping her fork. "Yes, I've always loved them. Words feel like little keys, you know? They unlock places, people." Lila tilted her head. "True enough. But sometimes, no matter how many keys you hold, doors stay shut." The table grew quieter. Marcus's father glanced at his daughter, then at Emma, as if weighing whether the moment should pass. But Lila pressed on. She set her fork down carefully. "2 months ago, I was driving home late from the hospital. I'm a nurse. Got pulled over. No reason given. The officer asked if the car was mine. I showed him registration, my badge. Still, he kept his hand near his gun. Told me to step out." Emma's chest tightened. "I tried explaining. My voice cracked, and he said I sounded nervous, like I was hiding something." He searched the car. "I stood there on the shoulder for 30 minutes while people drove by, staring. Eventually, he let me go. No ticket. Nothing." Lila's voice didn't waver, but her eyes shone. "You speak 9 languages, Emma. I speak 2. Didn't matter. That night, I didn't have words they wanted to hear. The silence that followed was thick." Emma's fork clattered against her plate as her hand shook. She had never imagined such humiliation, being reduced to suspicion for existing. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, though the words felt too small. Marcus's mother reached across, touching Lila's hand gently. "We tell our stories not for pity," she said softly, "but so others will know the truth we live." Marcus glanced at Emma. His expression was unreadable, but the weight of his earlier smile, the sharp, knowing one, made sense now. As the evening wore on, laughter returned in bursts, stories softened the edges of the table again. But Emma sat quieter than before. She absorbed every detail. The way Marcus's father bowed his head in silent thanks before eating, the pride in Lila's eyes despite her pain, the music that filled the pauses between words. When she finally stepped out into the cool night, her heart was heavy and full at once. The polished walls of her world felt fragile now, glass ready to fracture. She walked toward the bus stop, Marcus beside her. Streetlights cast long shadows over the cracked pavement. Neither spoke for a moment, until Emma finally said, "Thank you for letting me in." Marcus looked straight ahead. "It's not about letting you in. It's about whether you'll listen once you're here." The words landed with quiet force. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. In the silence that followed, the memory of Lila's story echoed louder than the night itself, and Emma knew this was only the beginning of what she had to confront. The week after dinner, Emma carried Lila's story like a stone in her chest. She walked into the office with new eyes, seeing cracks she had once overlooked, tones too sharp, questions too pointed, laughter too hollow. Marcus's words echoed every time she passed the glass walls. It's about whether you'll listen once you're here. By Thursday afternoon, the company boardroom filled for a quarterly review. Executives clustered around the long oak table, coffee steaming in porcelain cups, laughter sharp as the blinds rattled in the air-conditioned chill. Emma sat in a corner seat, her notebook open though her pen barely moved. The meeting began routinely, charts projected, profits discussed, targets dissected. But then, as numbers blurred into anecdotes, a senior executive leaned back, smirking. Well, he chuckled. I suppose Marcus has an advantage when negotiating overseas. He can bargain hard. Must run in the blood, right? The table erupted in laughter. Chairs tilted back, throats echoed, hands slapped against the polished wood. The sound was jagged, cold, filling the room like shards of glass. Marcus froze. His jaw tightened, fists clenched on the table's edge. For a moment, Emma thought he would stay silent as always, swallowing the humiliation. But then he stood, his voice steady yet trembling at the edges. Don't, he said. The laughter faltered. Don't reduce me or my family to a punchline. My work is earned, not inherited. My bloodline doesn't negotiate for me. I do. The silence that followed was suffocating. A few eyes dropped to papers, some darted toward the ceiling, others hardened with irritation at the discomfort. One executive chuckled weakly. Come on, Marcus. It's just a joke. Lighten up. His voice cracked as he answered, louder this time. A joke at whose expense? You laugh because you're safe. But you're laughing at scars I carry every day. Emma's heart raced. She wanted to speak, to stand beside him, but her throat locked. She felt the eyes of the room like 1,000 pinpricks. To side with him would mean crossing an invisible line. She could hear her father's voice in her head. Don't get involved in fights that aren't yours. Marcus's fists unclenched, but his shoulders were rigid. You think it's harmless, but I've watched my parents humiliated in stores, doubted in offices, questioned by police. All because of who they are. I've built everything you see here despite that, not because of it. And you sit here, mocking the very thing that almost kept me out of this room. A tense cough broke the silence. Someone muttered, He's overreacting. Another added, We're losing focus on the meeting. Emma gripped her pen so tightly her knuckles turned white. She saw the divide clearly now. Some leaning back, comfortable in complicity, others shrinking into silence, unwilling to risk. And Marcus, standing tall, alone, his voice carrying the weight of generations behind it. The senior executive shrugged, muttering, Didn't mean to hit a nerve. Marcus's laugh was humorless, jagged. That's the problem. You don't see the nerve because it's not yours. The room fell silent again, but it was the silence of dismissal, not solidarity. Chairs creaked, papers shuffled. The meeting moved forward, trying to bury the rupture. But Emma couldn't unhear it. The words rang inside her, joke, scars. Not yours. She stared at Marcus as he sat back down, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the screen though clearly seeing something far away. He looked smaller now though he hadn't moved. Not physically, spiritually. The room had boxed him in, cut his stance, dimmed his presence. And no one had stood beside him, not even her. Her silence roared in her ears. She felt the shame burn hotter than the laughter had. She scribbled nonsense in her notebook, trying to drown out the thud of her own heart. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped, and executives filed out, chuckling again as if nothing had happened. Marcus lingered a moment, gathering his papers slowly. Emma watched him slip them into his briefcase, his face carved from stone. Their eyes met for a second, and in his, she saw both fire and exhaustion. She wanted to speak, to say, I'm sorry, you're right, they were wrong, you weren't alone, but the words caught. Instead, she looked down, letting him walk past. The glass doors closed behind him with a final click. Emma sat frozen in the empty room, her reflection fractured in the polished table. For the first time in her life, silence felt like complicity, heavy and choking. The laughter from earlier still echoed faintly in the corridor. It followed her out, clinging like smoke, as she walked toward her desk with trembling hands. She knew she had crossed a line, not the one she feared, but the one that marked who she was becoming. And in the days that followed, that silence would haunt her more than the joke itself. The laughter faded, but the quiet that followed did not. It lodged inside Emma, humming whenever a door shut or a meeting ended. In the boardroom she had watched Marcus stand alone. Afterward she did the same, apart from the truth she knew. Sleep came in shards. In one dream the table stretched into a highway of glass. Executives sped while she ran without moving. A neon sign flashed joke, then rearranged. Not yours. She woke with her throat tight. At breakfast her father scrolled headlines. Tough quarter, he said. Leaders can't flinch. He meant the man who laughed the loudest. Her mother stirred coffee. Winners deserve what they earn. The rest, well, no one finished the sentence. Emma chewed toast that tasted like cardboard. She remembered dinner at Marcus's house. The gospel, the steam, Lila's steady voice on the roadside shoulder. Sometimes, her mother added, people look for excuses. The spoon clicked against the mug. The sound was small and cruel. At work Slack pinged like rain. A private thread snickered about sensitivity training. Memes arrived, clever, corrosive. Emma watched bubbles pulse. She typed once, not funny, then deleted it. She closed the window, as if shutting a door erased the room. Memory kept inventory. The day in high school she corrected a classmate's tense and everyone laughed. The classmate stopped speaking. The party where she rolled out phrases like tricks while a server stood 3 feet away, invisible. The professor who called her articulate and her pleased smile before she noticed behind her had not been called anything at all. Guilt was not a feeling now, it was architecture. It shaped what she noticed. The guard's glance at a badge, the receptionist lowering her voice with one person and raising it with another, the elevator's silence thickening when Marcus entered. Her own voice became cautious, not because she might say the wrong thing, but because she already had. That evening, dinner clinked politely. Her father mentioned a neighbor's promotion. Deserved, he said. The man never complains. Her mother nodded. People should stop making everything about identity. She didn't look at Emma. Emma imagined telling them about the roadside search, the boardroom laugh, the way a smile can be a blade. The words lined up in her throat and refused to cross her teeth. She excused herself and carried her shame upstairs like laundry. In her room she opened her laptop and searched. How to apologize without centering yourself. How to be an ally at work. How to interrupt a joke. Articles bloomed and withered. Some were lists. Others were confessions. All felt smaller than the silence she had built. She drafted, deleted, drafted. I'm sorry looked thin, like a napkin beneath a flame. I should have spoken felt truer, but also cowardly, because she hadn't. Teach me turned her into the student, placing labor back on him. She erased the phrase. She closed her eyes and listened. The house murmured. Pipes, wind at the eaves, dull thud of the television. Beneath it she heard the boardroom. The smirk, the laugh, advantage, the silence that wore her name. The message she finally wrote was plain. Marcus, I stayed silent in that meeting. I was wrong to. I won't ask you to comfort me or explain anything. If you're willing to talk, I'll listen and I'll act. If not, I understand. Emma, her finger hovered. She imagined paths. Living in this hallway between knowing and doing, or stepping through. She pressed send. The chime was soft. It didn't absolve anything. But the hum inside her quieted. Not into peace, but into purpose. She set the phone down and watched the blank screen. The reflection that looked back seemed older, as if polish had worn away to reveal something truer. Downstairs, a door shut. Footsteps. Laughter. Upstairs, Emma inhaled. She exhaled once. Her phone vibrated once, one message, unread. She reached for it and opened the thread. Emma stared at the sent message for days. Every time her phone lit up, her chest clenched, but Marcus didn't reply. Work passed in fragments. Slides, meetings, hallway chatter. but beneath it all lay silence. Not the silence she had chosen in the boardroom, but one imposed now, deliberate, weighty. By the third day, she couldn't bear it. She rehearsed lines in the bathroom mirror, her voice catching on each attempt. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'll do better." Every phrase felt either hollow or desperate, but avoidance felt worse. When she finally saw Marcus leaving a late strategy session, she acted before she lost her nerve. He moved quickly through the glass corridor, jacket draped over his arm, expression unreadable. "Marcus," she called. Her voice cracked slightly. He stopped but didn't turn. Only when she repeated his name did he pivot, eyes sharp, cautious. Emma's throat tightened. "I need to say something. About the meeting." He exhaled through his nose, adjusting his grip on the jacket. "You don't need to." "But I do," she pressed, stepping closer. The corridor lights painted pale rectangles across the floor. "I sat there while they left. I didn't say anything. And that silence, it's been eating at me." Marcus studied her, his expression a mask. "So now you want forgiveness?" The word stung. Emma shook her head quickly. "No, I don't deserve that. I'm not asking you to make me feel better. I just—" Her voice wavered, but she forced it steady. "I just need you to know I was wrong. I froze because it was easier for me to stay safe than to stand with you. And that's cowardice." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. The hum of the air system filled the gap. His eyes softened only slightly, but not into kindness, into something more like recognition. "You're right," he said finally. "It was cowardice. And it happens every day. People watch. They know it's wrong. But silence keeps the gears moving." Emma's hands trembled at her sides. "I don't want to be part of that machine anymore." He tilted his head, searching her face. "Then don't." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have something I don't, something they can't dismiss. Privilege. When you speak, they'll hear it differently than when I do. That's the truth. You hate it? Good. But use it." Emma's breath caught. "Use my privilege? As leverage?" "Exactly. Sympathy won't cut it. Action does. Call it out when it happens. Not later, not in private, there. When the jokes land, when the cuts are made. That's when it matters." His tone wasn't gentle. It was edged with steel. But beneath it, Emma felt the shape of a challenge, a door he was daring her to walk through. She swallowed hard. "And if I stumble? If I get it wrong?" "Then you keep going," Marcus said flatly. "The cost of standing up is nothing compared to the cost of silence. I've paid that cost my whole life." The corridor seemed smaller now, the air heavier, as if every word hung between them like glass waiting to shatter. Emma nodded slowly, tears pricking the edges of her vision but not falling. "I'll do it," she said. "I can't undo my silence, but I can break it next time." Marcus's eyes lingered on her, measuring. At last he gave a short nod. Not approval, not absolution, just acknowledgement. "Then we'll see," he said quietly. He shifted his jacket, turned, and walked down the corridor. Emma remained standing in the pale light, her heart pounding. She didn't feel redeemed. She didn't feel clean. But she felt awake, alive in a way that both terrified and steadied her. As she walked out of the building, the night air hit her skin sharp and cool. Streetlights glowed against the glass facade, their reflections fractured, like cracks spreading across the surface of everything she once believed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. An email notification. Annual company gala, all staff invitation. Emma stared at it, pulse quickening. She already knew what waited there. An opportunity, a test. She closed her eyes, hearing Marcus's words. Not later. There. And when the night of the gala arrived, she promised herself she would not stay silent again. The gala shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers threw prisms across marble floors, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and the hum of polite laughter. Emma walked through the crowd with her invitation still folded in her clutch, Marcus's challenge echoing in her head. Not later. There. She found him across the room, near the stage where executives clustered like a constellation of dark suits and glittering dresses. Marcus stood slightly apart, posture straight but eyes distant, as though he'd already braced himself for the evening's inevitable cruelties. The speeches began, each one a performance polished to a sheen. Executives praised innovation, diversity, resilience. Words like banners, empty and weightless. Emma felt the hollowness of them settle on her skin. Then it happened, subtle but sharp enough to slice the air. One of the senior partners, glass raised in mock salute, said with a laugh, "And let's not forget our international edge, Marcus, our very own cultural ambassador. Must be handy having immigrant instincts in business." Laughter rippled, softer this time than in the boardroom, but still there, an echo of approval, a current of complicity. Emma's chest tightened. The world seemed to tilt, narrowing to that single cruel phrase. Marcus's face remained composed, though his hand tightened around his glass. His eyes flicked down, away, absorbing the blow in silence. Emma felt the old paralysis crawl into her throat, that urge to shrink, to let it pass. But not this time. She stepped forward before she could think, her heels clicking against marble, the sound slicing through the laughter. Her voice came sharper than she expected, carrying farther than the microphone on stage. "That wasn't funny." The room stilled, heads turned, conversations froze mid-word. Emma's pulse hammered, but she forced herself to stand tall, her chin lifted. The partner blinked, a smile still plastered on his face. "Excuse me, you should be," Emma said, her voice steady now, each syllable deliberate. "What you just said wasn't a compliment. It was a stereotype dressed up as humor. And the fact that people laughed doesn't make it harmless. It makes it worse." The silence thickened. The chandeliers seemed suddenly too bright, spotlighting her in the middle of the room. She felt dozens of eyes on her. Executives squirming, interns whispering, Marcus watching. The partner let out a strained chuckle. "Come on, it was lighthearted. No need to make a scene." Emma's hands trembled, but her voice cut like glass. "A scene is what happens when people stay silent and let racism pass as banter." "I won't." Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others stared at the floor, but the current had shifted. The smug certainty in the partner's expression faltered. One executive cleared her throat, awkwardly supportive. "Perhaps we should keep things professional." Emma turned to her sharply. "Professional doesn't mean complicit. If this is the culture we uphold, then professionalism is just a mask for prejudice." The words hung, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Emma wasn't shrinking. She was expanding, filling the space that silence had once stolen. From the edge of the crowd, Marcus's gaze held hers. He didn't smile, didn't nod, but his expression carried quiet recognition, a flicker of respect unspoken. It was enough. The partner muttered something about apologies, his voice small, swallowed by the room's shifting air. The speeches resumed, thinner now, every word strained against the fracture Emma had opened. She returned to her seat, her heart still pounding, her breath shallow. She didn't feel triumphant exactly. She felt raw, trembling, alive. The silence around her was no longer hers. It was theirs. The gala's music resumed, but softer, uncertain. Emma stared at the stage lights, their brilliance blurring into stars. For the first time, she felt the weight of her privilege not as a comfort, but as a weapon she had chosen to wield. Marcus passed her as the evening ended. He paused, just long enough to say quietly, "That's how it starts." And then he was gone, swallowed into the night. Emma stood alone among glittering gowns and fading laughter, knowing a threshold had been crossed, one she could never return from. The music thinned as the gala emptied, prisms fading on marble. Emma stood until her hands stopped shaking, her clutch imprinting her palm. The echo of her words, "That wasn't funny," still shimmered in the chandeliers, unbroken. Beyond the curtains, the city breathed. She found Marcus near the coat check, straightening his cuffs. For a moment they looked at each other, not sharing triumph, not trading smiles, just acknowledging the fracture that had opened and the light in it. Walk, he said. They stepped into night cooled by a passing shower. Streetlights dragged spears across puddles. The building receded, a glass cliff mirroring sky and, briefly, them. When you smiled in the lounge, Emma said, I thought you were mocking me. I was protecting myself, he answered. Mockery can be a shield when truth keeps getting cut. They passed a florist closing its gate. Petals swept into a bruise on the pavement. A bus sighed at the corner. The city moved. I keep replaying everything, she said. Dinner. The boardroom. Tonight. I used to think language was a ladder. Now I see who gets to climb. A ladder's only useful if no one is kicking it while you're on it. They paused at a crosswalk. The signal blinked a red hand, then a white figure. Emma followed its rhythm, matching something steadier than fear. I didn't fix anything in there, she said. No, Marcus said. You interrupted something. That matters. They reached the river. Water carried scattered light like broken necklaces. Emma leaned on the railing. Metal cooled her forearms. She thought of Lila on the roadside shoulder, of her parents' careful, cruel sentences, of the boardroom laugh still ringing in her bones. When I said 9 languages, she murmured, I meant it like fireworks. Fireworks light the sky, he said. Signals call help. Flares say, see us. Decide which you're launching. Heat rose in her chest. Not shame this time, but ignition. There will be a cost. There always is. A siren rose and faded. The night smelled of wet stone and jasmine. Emma imagined Monday, the careful smiles, the Slack channel, the calculations. She imagined standing again, until it became less an act of courage than a habit of truth. Thank you, she said. For what? For not absolving me. For asking more. I'm not a priest, he said. I'm trying to work without dodging debris. If you clear some, we both breathe easier. They walked back toward the avenue. A boy on a scooter streaked past. Somewhere a saxophone climbed a minor staircase and hung there. The world, indifferent and immense, kept happening. At the corner they stopped. The hotel's glass cliff glowed in the distance, lighthouse and warning. Emma turned to Marcus. He still didn't smile, and she didn't need him to. Recognition lived quieter than that, in the absence of dismissal. I'll see you Monday, she said. Monday, he replied. They parted, 2 figures splitting a reflection, each carrying a different portion of the same weight. Emma walked toward the subway, heels rhythmic against wet stone. With every step, the mocking smile that once scorched her receded and returned as a mark she chose to keep, a reminder of where the flame touched and what it asked. The city's breath rose and fell. Somewhere, a light switched on over dinner stories. Somewhere else, a joke warmed in a throat, ready to slide into a room like a knife disguised as a ribbon. Between those places, on a thin sidewalk, Emma set her jaw and practiced the sound of her next interruption. Justice, she realized, was less a victory than a practice. It moved like walking, step, breath, step. She headed for the station, for Monday, for work that waits in lit rooms and unlit corners. She would keep showing up tomorrow again. She did not rush. She kept pace with the long labor of it, letting the night hold her in its necessary light.